across the sterile walls. Marcus turns toward her, his eyes wide with the kind of terror that comes from knowing something is fundamentally wrong with your own body. "Doctor?" His voice is hoarse, strained. "What did you see?" The silence stretches like a taut wire ready to snap. Outside, the hospital continues its endless rhythm-beeping monitors, squeaking wheels, hushed conversations, but in room 7, time has stopped. Doctor. Chun's medical training wars with her basic human instinct to run. She's seen infected ears, foreign objects, even tumors. But this is alive, and it's been living inside Marcus Thompson for God knows how long the morning. Sun streams through yellow gingham curtains, casting a warm glow over the kitchen where Margaret Thompson has made breakfast every day for the past 43 years. Her husband Marcus sits at their oak table, the same one they bought when they were newlyweds, absently stirring his coffee. While staring out at their garden, "You're doing it again," Margaret says, setting a plate of scrambled eggs before him. Her voice carries the gentle exasperation of a woman who's learned to read her husband's moods, like weather patterns. Marcus tilts his head slightly to the right, a gesture that's become as natural as breathing over the past few months. "Doing what, Maggie?" "That thing with your head, like you're trying to drain water from your ear." She sits across from him, her own coffee growing cold as she studies his face. At 72, Marcus still has the strong jaw and kind eyes that made her fall in love with him at 19, but lately there's been something different, a distance, as if he's constantly listening to something she can't hear. Marcus touches his left ear absently, a habit that's become so frequent Margaret has started counting 17 times during breakfast yesterday, 22 times while watching the evening news. "It's just blocked," he says, the same explanation he's given for weeks. "Probably wax. Nothing a little warm water won't fix." But Margaret knows her husband. She knows the way his shoulders tense when he thinks she's not looking, the way he started sleeping on his right side exclusively, the way he sometimes stops mid-sentence, as if distracted by something only he can perceive. She knows, too, that Marcus Thompson is the most stubborn man in 3 counties, a trait that served him well during his 30-year career as a construction foreman, but now makes him impossible to convince when it comes to doctors. "Marcus Thompson, you haven't seen a doctor in 15 years? Not since that nasty cut on your hand." She reaches across the table, covering his weathered fingers with her own. "What if it's something serious?" Marcus pulls his hand away gently, but firmly. "It's not serious, Maggie. Just getting old, that's all. Ears get blocked when you get old." But even as he says it, he can feel them, the tiny movements like whispers made flesh, tickling the deepest parts of his ear canal. Sometimes late at night when the house is quiet, he swears he can hear them, a sound like rain on leaves, or paper rustling in the wind. He tells himself it's tinnitus, a normal part of aging. He tells himself a lot of things to avoid the truth that's been growing inside him like a tumor. Something is very, very wrong. The Thompson family dining room fills with the familiar chaos of Sunday dinner. Their daughter Jessica bounces their 18-month-old grandson, Tyler, on her lap while her husband, David, carves the roast beef. Margaret bustles between kitchen and dining room, ensuring everyone has enough gravy, enough vegetables, enough of everything that makes a house feel like home Marcus sits at the head of the table, but his usual commanding presence seems diminished. He keeps touching his ear, unaware that his family is exchanging worried glances above his head. "Dad, are you okay?" Jessica asks, shifting Tyler to her other arm. At 38, she has her mother's intuition and her father's directness, a combination that makes her an excellent nurse and an impossible daughter to fool. "You seem distracted?" "I'm fine." "Sweetheart." Marcus reaches for the salt, but his movement is awkward, uncoordinated. The shaker slips from his fingers, clattering to the floor and spilling white crystals across. Margaret's carefully polished hardwood. The silence that follows is heavy with unspoken concern. Tyler breaks it with a giggle, reaching his chubby fingers toward his grandfather's face. "Gampa." He squeals, but when Marcus turns toward the sound, his movement is sluggish like he's underwater. David clears his throat. "Marcus, maybe you should—" "I said I'm fine." Marcus's voice carries an edge they've rarely heard, sharp enough to cut. Tyler's face crumples, and he begins to cry that heartbroken wail that only babies can produce. Margaret's patience, worn thin by weeks of worry, finally snaps. "Marcus Thompson, look at yourself. You can barely hear your own grandson. You're constantly touching that ear. And yesterday I caught you talking to yourself in the garage. This is not fine." The words hang in the air like smoke from a house fire. Marcus stares at his family, his wife of 43 years, his daughter who still looks at him like he hung the moon, his son-in-law who's never questioned his judgment, his grandson who sees only wonder in the world. They're all looking at him with the same expression, fear, for the first time since this all began. Marcus allows himself to consider that maybe Margaret is right. Maybe the tickling sensation that's become a constant companion, the way sounds seem muffled on his left side, the strange dreams of things crawling through endless tunnels. Maybe it's not just age. Maybe it's something worse. "All right," he says quietly, his voice barely audible over Tyler's subsiding sniffles. "I'll see a doctor." The relief on Margaret's face is so profound it makes his chest tight with guilt. How long has she been carrying this worry? How long has he been too proud, too scared, too stubborn to see what this was doing to the people he loves most? But even as he makes the promise, he can feel them stirring in the depths of his ear, responding to his elevated heartbeat, his increased anxiety. Whatever is living inside him knows that its secret is about to be exposed. And somehow, Marcus gets the feeling that it doesn't want to be found. Dr. William Patterson has been practicing family medicine for 38 years, long enough to develop the kind of bedside manner that puts patients at ease and the diagnostic instincts that come from seeing everything the human body can produce. But as he examines Marcus Thompson on this gray Tuesday morning, something makes the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "So you're experiencing hearing loss in the left ear?" "Doctor," Patterson asks, adjusting his reading glasses as he reviews Marcus's intake form. "Any pain? Discharge? Feeling of fullness?" Marcus shifts uncomfortably on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath him. "No pain, really, just blocked, like there's something in there that won't come out." "Doctor." Patterson nods, reaching for his otoscope. It's a routine examination, one he's performed thousands of times. He expects to find impacted earwax, maybe a small infection, What he doesn't expect is the sight that greets him when he peers into Marcus's ear canal. The light from the otoscope reveals what looks like a mass of pale, writhing tissue deep within the ear. For a moment, Dr. Patterson thinks his eyes are playing tricks on him. Maybe it's just inflamed skin or unusual wax buildup. But then the mass moves, contracting away from the light with a fluidity that makes his stomach lurch. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Patterson says carefully, trying to keep his voice steady, "how long did you say you've been experiencing these symptoms?" "About 3 months. Maybe 4. Marcus's voice sounds distant, hollow. "Started as just a little tickle, you know? Like when you get water in your ear after swimming." Dr. Patterson removes the otoscope, his mind racing through possibilities. In nearly 4 decades of practice, he's seen foreign objects, infections, even small tumors in ear canals. But nothing that moved like that, nothing that seemed so alive. "I'm going to need to refer you to a specialist," he says, already reaching for his prescription pad. That's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Dr. Sarah Chun at City General is excellent. Marcus's face pales. "Is it serious?" Dr. Patterson pauses, pen hovering over the referral form. His instincts tell him to be reassuring, to downplay the severity until they know more. But that thing in Marcus's ear, the way it moved, the way it seemed to respond to stimuli defies his understanding of normal pathology. "Let's just say, Doctor, Chun has equipment I don't have," he says finally. "Better imaging, specialized tools. She'll be able to give us a clearer picture of what we're dealing with." But even as he writes, the referral, Dr. Patterson knows that some pictures are better left unclear. Some mysteries of the human body are too disturbing to fully illuminate. As Marcus leaves his office, Dr. Patterson finds himself reaching for his anatomy textbooks, searching for anything that might explain what he saw writhing in the darkness of a 72-year-old man's ear. He finds nothing. That night, Dr. Patterson dreams of pale, segmented things crawling through the corridors of his mind, and he wakes with the unsettling certainty that Marcus Thompson's problem is far worse than any of them imagine. The Ent Department at City General Hospital hums with the quiet efficiency of modern medicine. Dr. Sarah Chun reviews Marcus Thompson's file as he's prepared for a comprehensive examination, but nothing in his medical history suggests what she's about to discover. The MRI results are unusual. Dr. Chun tells Margaret, who sits in the consultation room with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Marcus is in pre-op, being prepared for a procedure that will require sedation. Something Dr. Chun insisted on after her initial examination left her shaken. Margaret's knuckles are white with tension. Unusual how? Dr. Chun pulls up the MRI images on her computer screen, pointing to a series of bright spots clustered deep within Marcus's left ear canal and middle ear space. These areas of increased signal intensity suggest some kind of foreign material or organism. The pattern is, I've never seen anything quite like it. The images look like a constellation of stars against the dark background of Marcus's skull, but there's something organic about their arrangement, as if they've organized themselves according to some biological imperative. Could it be a tumor? Margaret asks, though she's not sure she wants to know the answer. The imaging characteristics aren't consistent with typical neoplasms. Doctor. Chun explains gently. The way these masses are distributed, their apparent movement between the initial scan and the follow-up we did yesterday, it suggests something alive. Margaret's face goes white. Alive? Doctor. Chen nods grimly. I've consulted with colleagues in infectious disease and tropical medicine. The closest match we've found is a case reported in the Amazon basin, a patient who presented with similar symptoms after exposure to a particular species of parasitic insect larvae. She pulls up another image, this one from a medical journal. It shows microscopic larvae, translucent and segmented, clustered together like tiny snakes. These are dermestid beetle larvae. Normally, they feed on dead organic matter animal, carcasses, dried skin, that sort of thing. But in rare cases, if they're introduced into a warm, moist environment like the human ear canal, they can survive and even reproduce. Margaret stares at the image, her mind struggling to process what? Doctor. Chun is telling her, you're saying my husband has bugs living in his ear? It's a working theory, Doctor. Chun says carefully. The good news is that if that's what we're dealing with, it's treatable. We can remove them surgically and treat any secondary infection. The procedure we're about to perform will give us definitive answers. But even as she speaks, Doctor, Chun remembers the sight that greeted her during Marcus's initial examination, the way the mass recoiled from light, the rhythmic pulsing that suggested not just life, but coordinated life. In her 15 years of practice, she's removed everything from toy soldiers to live cockroaches from ear canals, but nothing has ever made her feel the way she felt looking into Marcus Thompson's ear. Nothing has ever made her feel like she was being watched back. In the operating room, Marcus lies unconscious under general anesthesia, unaware that in a few minutes, Doctor, Chun will make a discovery that will haunt her dreams for months to come. The monitors beep steadily, tracking his vital signs as nurses prepare the specialized equipment needed for what they hope will be a routine extraction. But in the depths of Marcus's ear, something senses the approaching light, the coming disturbance of its carefully constructed world. In the darkness where it has lived and grown and multiplied for months, it prepares for what it somehow knows will be its final performance. The operating room falls silent except for the steady beep of monitors and the whisper of the ventilation system. Doctor. Chun adjusts the surgical microscope. Its powerful LED lights focused on Marcus Thompson's left ear canal. What she sees in the magnified view makes her breath catch in her throat. The ear canal is completely occluded by a writhing mass of pale, segmented larvae. They move with purposeful coordination, as if aware of the intrusion of light and instruments. Some are no larger than rice grains, while others have grown to the size of small maggots, their translucent bodies pulsing with dark fluid. Suction. Doctor. Chun says quietly, her voice barely steady. The surgical nurse hands her a fine-tipped aspirator, designed for delicate ear procedures. But nothing in her training prepared her for this. As the suction tip approaches the mass, the larvae react with startling intelligence. They contract away from the instrument, clustering together in a defensive formation that makes Dr. Chun's skin crawl. She's removed foreign objects before, but never anything that seemed to understand it was being removed. Dr. Chun? The surgical nurse's voice is tight with barely controlled revulsion. Through the overhead monitor, Everyone in the room can see what's happening in Marcus's ear, the way the creatures move, the way they seem to communicate through touch and vibration. Get me the irrigation system. Doctor. Chun orders, switching tactics. If she can't extract them individually, maybe she can flush them out. The warm saline solution flows into the ear canal, and suddenly the creatures become frantic. They pour out of Marcus's ear in a writhing stream of pale bodies, dozens of them, maybe more than 100. The surgical tech holding the collection basin stumbles backward as the larvae hit the metal container, some of them still moving despite being separated from their host. The sound they make a wet, chittering noise like dry leaves in wind fills the operating room with an atmosphere of pure horror. My God, whispers the anesthesiologist, his voice muffled by his surgical mask. How long have they been in there? Doctor. Chung continues the irrigation, watching in fascination and disgust as more larvae emerge. Some are clearly mature, their bodies elongated and segmented like tiny centipedes. Others appear to be in various stages of development, from translucent eggs to fully formed larvae, ready to pupate. Based on the size variation and developmental stages, Dr. Chen says, speaking partly to her team and partly to the recording device that documents the procedure, I'd estimate they've been present for at least 4 to 6 months. The larger specimens suggest they've been feeding and growing within the ear canal. As the last of the larvae are flushed out, Dr. Chun examines the ear canal with her microscope. The tissue is inflamed and damaged, with multiple small wounds where the creatures have been feeding. But there's something else, a pattern of scarring that suggests this isn't their first home. Nurse, I need magnification on the tympanic membrane, she says, adjusting the microscope. What she sees makes her stomach turn. The eardrum is perforated with tiny, precise holes too regular to be accidental damage. These creatures didn't just stumble into Marcus's ear. They came from somewhere deeper, somewhere inside his body where they've been living far longer than anyone imagined. The heart monitor begins to beep more rapidly as Marcus's unconscious body responds to the trauma of the procedure. His blood pressure spikes and his hands begin to twitch as if he's trying to scratch at his ear, even under anesthesia. He's becoming unstable. The anesthesiologist reports, adjusting the medication levels. We need to finish this quickly. Doctor. Chen performs a final irrigation, ensuring no larvae remain in the ear canal. The collection basin now contains what looks like a nightmare made flesh, hundreds of pale, writhing creatures in various stages of development, some still moving weakly in the saline solution. As the team prepares to close the procedure, Dr. Chun can't shake the feeling that they've only discovered the tip of something much larger and more horrifying. The way the larvae had organized themselves, the precision of the perforations in the eardrum, the sheer number of creatures that had made their home in Marcus Thompson's ear. None of it suggests random infestation. It suggests purpose, intelligence, planning, and if these creatures came from somewhere deeper in Marcus's body, if they've been living and breeding inside him for longer than anyone wants to consider, then what they've just witnessed might not be an extraction at all. It might be an evacuation, the recovery. Room is quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft whoosh of the oxygen concentrator. Marcus Thompson lies propped up in bed, his left ear covered with a pristine white bandage that somehow makes him look more vulnerable than his 72 years should allow. Margaret sits beside him, her hand wrapped around his, both of them still processing what Dr. Chun has told them. 237, Marcus says quietly, his voice hoarse from the anesthesia. That's how many she counted. Margaret shudders, unable to look at the medical photos. Dr. Chun showed them images of the larvae writhing in the collection basin, their pale bodies glistening under the surgical lights. How is that even possible? How could something like that live inside you for so long without us knowing? Marcus turns his head slightly, wincing at the movement. For the first time in months, the constant tickling sensation is gone, replaced by a dull ache that somehow feels cleaner, more honest than the alien presence he's carried for so long. There's something I never told you, he says, his eyes fixed on the ceiling tiles. About Vietnam, about what happened during my second tour. Margaret tightens her grip on his hand. In 43 years of marriage, Marcus has rarely spoken about the war, and never about the 13 months he spent in the jungle during 1971 and 1972. She's learned to read the signs. The way he sometimes wakes at night drenched in sweat, the way certain sounds make him flinch, the way he never talks about the scar that runs from his left temple to his jaw. You don't have to, she begins, but Marcus shakes his head. Yes, I do. Doctor, Chun thinks these things might be related to something that happened to me decades ago, something I buried so deep. I almost convinced myself it never happened. He closes his eyes, and suddenly he's 23 again, crouched in a foxhole near the Cambodian border, while mortars scream overhead. There was this mission, off the books, if you know what I mean, deep in the jungle, tracking enemy supply lines. We'd been out there for 6 days when we stumbled into an ambush. Marcus's voice becomes distant, mechanical, as if he's reading from a report rather than reliving a memory. I took shrapnel to the side of my head, not enough to kill me, but enough to knock me unconscious. When I woke up, I was alone. The rest of my squad was gone dead, captured, scattered. I never found out which. Margaret has stopped breathing. In all their years together, she's never heard this story. She realizes now that she's married to a stranger, a man who's carried secrets in his body like shrapnel, like wounds that never properly healed. I was unconscious for hours, maybe days. When I came to, I was lying in this pit, full of rotting vegetation, dead animals, God knows what else. The smell was Marcus pauses, his face pale with memory. I thought I was going to die there. Hell, maybe I should have. He opened his eyes, looking directly at Margaret for the first time since beginning his story. But something else was living in that pit. Beetles, larvae, things I'd never seen before. They were everywhere in my clothes, my hair, crawling on my skin, and some of them got inside the wound on my head. I could feel them moving around in there, but I was too weak to do anything about it. The machines monitoring Marcus's vital signs begin to beep more rapidly as his heart rate increases. Margaret wants to tell him to stop, that he doesn't need to relive this horror, but she can see in his eyes that he needs to say these words, needs to finally let them out of the dark place where they've been festering for 53 years. A medic found me 2 days later, half dead from infection and dehydration. They cleaned my wounds, gave me antibiotics, shipped me to a field hospital in Saigon. But I always felt like something was still in there, you know? Something they missed. Margaret's voice is barely a whisper. You think those things in your ear were the descendants of whatever got into my head in that jungle? Marcus finishes, living in me all this time, hiding in places where no one would think to look, waiting. Waiting for what? Marcus is quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands, the same hands that pulled him out of that pit in the jungle, that built a life and a family and a home in spite of the darkness he carried inside. I don't know, maybe waiting for me to get old enough, weak enough, for them to finally take over completely. The thought hangs in the air between them like smoke from a fire that can never be completely extinguished. Margaret realizes that the man she's loved for over 40 years has been fighting a war inside his own body, a battle against an enemy so small and patient that it could wait decades for the right moment to strike. Are they gone now? She asks. All of them? Marcus touches the bandage covering his ear. Doctor, Chun thinks so. She's running tests on blood and tissue samples, but the imaging shows no signs of infestation anywhere else in my body. Whatever was living in my ear, it seems to have been isolated. But even as he says the words, Marcus can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. The creatures, Doctor, Chan extracted seemed too organized, too purposeful to be simple parasites, and the way they moved, the way they seemed to respond to threats with collective intelligence, it suggests something far more complex than random infestation, something that might have learned over 53 years of hiding in the darkness of his body, how to survive in ways no medical textbook has ever documented. As Margaret holds his hand and the monitors continue their steady rhythm, Marcus Thompson tries to convince himself that the tickling sensation is really gone, that the strange dreams of tunnels and darkness will finally stop, that the war he's been fighting inside his own skull is finally over. But in the deepest parts of his memory, in the places where trauma lives and breeds and mutates into something unrecognizable, he can still hear them, a sound like rain on leaves, or paper rustling in the wind, or something ancient and patient whispering secrets he spent a lifetime trying to forget. And he realizes that some wars never really end. They just change battlefields. 6 months later, Dr. Sarah Chun stands before an audience of medical professionals at the International Conference on Parasitic Diseases, a carousel of microscopic images rotating behind her on the presentation screen. The images show the larvae extracted from Marcus Thompson's ear, their segmented bodies, their unusual developmental patterns, their disturbing organizational behavior. The case I'm presenting today challenges our understanding of long-term parasitic adaptation. Dr. Chun begins, her voice steady despite the murmurs of disbelief rippling through the audience. The patient is a 72-year-old male, presented with unilateral hearing loss and a sensation of oral fullness. What we discovered defies conventional parasitology. She clicks to the next slide, showing the MRI images that first revealed the extent of the infestation. Initial imaging suggested a foreign body or possible neoplasm. However, surgical exploration revealed a colony of highly adapted insect larvae that had been living within the patient's ear canal for an estimated 6 months to 2 years. Dr. James Morrison, a parasitologist from Johns Hopkins, raises his hand. Doctor Chun, what species identification were you able to make? Doctor Chun pauses, remembering the weeks of testing that followed Marcus's surgery. That's where this case becomes truly unusual. DNA analysis suggests these organisms are related to dermestid beetles, but with significant genetic variations that don't match any known species. The larvae displayed behavioral patterns, coordinated movement, collective response to threats that suggest adaptation far beyond typical insect intelligence. She clicks to a video taken during the extraction, and the audience falls silent as they watch the larvae moving in organized formation, responding to the surgical instruments with what can only be described as tactical awareness. Furthermore, Dr. Chun continues, the patient's medical history includes combat exposure in Southeast Asia over 50 years ago. Tissue analysis of the ear canal revealed scarring patterns consistent with chronic, low-grade inflammation dating back decades. We believe the original infestation occurred during wartime, with the organisms adapting to survive in their human host for over half a century.